Ah, hello.
Ah, hello Solo. Didn't see you there. Still chasing that light, are you? Hmm. Well, I found my light a long time ago. It was a game by the name of Dark Souls.
Oh,
I basically see it as my maiden. But how does one connect to their maiden?
I have a proposition.
Ah, of course, writing a love letter to them. Oh, and so there. I hope you're not planning on reading this letter if you haven't already been on your adventure.
Do you find that strange?
But if you don't mind, or if you already did, I think I'll start the letter with Dark Souls is my favorite video game of all time. Maybe one of the best. Yes, you may have heard other games be called that before, or more than once, but I really do believe Dark Souls is deserving that recognition. This game is iconic, from its lessons learned from Demon Souls, and what this game managed to pull it off was amazing, epic, cool, other similes I can't think of right now. Plus, this game's impact was huge and still felt from this day. FromSoft making a big name for themselves and struck gold! The marketing of the game, with its unforgiving gameplay, a callback to the classic challenges from games like Mike Tyson. Basically, this game is really hard, and are you up to the challenge? And because of that, for a good while, any game from any genre that was somewhat more difficult than normal was called the Dark Souls of X, like Cuphead and its run and gun. Its combat was totally free and allowed anyone the freedom to play whatever style they wanted, and it was viable, to the point where there are magic only builds, melee only builds, and bow only runs, which even I took part in. Yes, that's me. I know it's really old and it's bad, but it just goes to show how much depth there is. Its levels and story were told in a way that was a breath of fresh air, with the game not telling you where nor exactly why you're going to these places. That was something for you to discover. It allowed anyone to carve their own path to the end, like in the OG Legend of Zelda, with the story taking a back seat until you looked for it. It meant that for those who didn't care much about the story, could just skip it and focus on what they loved. Okay. I think that's enough rambling. Let's actually get started and dissect and pinpoint the depth of these games. It might seem a little weird starting with the music, but hear me out because my voice is pretty much the only thing you hear right now. A lot of games' soundtracks are huge, from background music from a stage, save menus, bosses, enemy fights / battle themes, character themes, etc. etc. But not Dark Souls though. Dark Souls has a very small soundtrack to listen to. Most of the game's sounds ranges from ambience to nothing at all. The only other thing you hear is your armor shuffling with every step. Despite the lack of a background noise, this makes the game a lot more real and closer to our reality. So, when the game does pull out a soundtrack, or we hear something, it sticks out a lot more and is more memorable. There are only a few places where you hear music in Dark Souls: bosses, Firelink Shrine, and of course, the bonfire. Little editor's note here. I also forgot to mention that the Fair Lady also has background music, but most of this applies to her as well. The bosses and the respected themes are amazing, from the demons with their music with drums, violins, and a chorus, making you feel like you're fighting something unholy or something that breathes fire. The iconic Ornstein and Smough, with their trumpets, harp, and an organ. These two have glory, pride. Seems like they are the talk of legends, and you're fighting them. Grave Lord Leto's loud cries and moans mixed with very slow, music gives you a feeling that you're fighting the undead, or the undead is rising. And one we'll talk about a little bit later, and is piano's melody, sounding like you're fighting somebody's desperate last moments, like it's the very end, and it is all that they hope for. That's enough of the bosses, let's move on to the bonfires and Firelink. Firelink is one of the main safe havens in the game, as it's the only place to have a theme play in the background. Bonfires are basically mini Firelinks, duh, as these two are meant to make you feel safe, warm, and cozy, and they do an amazing job at that. The feeling of finding and lighting a bonfire after a long and tough road is a feeling like no other. With all this in mind, you might be asking, why is the music only limited to bonfires and Firelink? Without that music, wouldn't the world feel dead and hollow? Who are these bosses and why do they get their own themes? Now, let me be clear. I am no lore guide. Most of the story is up to the player to decide. However, I will go over the basics of what we know in the story. Just some simple context. Let me just get my lore guide voice. The world of Dark Souls is near the end of the Age of Fire. Lord Gwyn and his Black Knights ruled the kingdom of Lordrend. Humans also existed in this world and carried with them their humanity. Humanity settles in the dark, and Gwyn, who doesn't want to lose his power, nor his kingdoms to the humans, links the fire, and thus when he links this fire, the Age of Fire now loops, forming a ring around it. It burns every human, making them undead and hollow. We fast forward to your undead, locked away in their cell, until they burst out of the asylum. You are then told to link the fire. Fuck! You are then told to link the flame, as the world is almost coming to an end, and it's up to you to save it. At the end of your adventure, you fight Lord Gwyn, and after killing him, you are then left with a choice: linking the flame, or walking away and allowing the Age of Dark to begin. Again, this is a very basic overview of the story. However, for the locations you visit, the people you meet, and the things you fight, you get the answer for all these. However, you have to look for them. Look around yourself and you begin to feel like all these areas and places are long past their prime. Mixed with the lack of sound, these places look and sound basically dead. Then you're left wondering for more, and what they would have been like. The level design in Dark Souls is incredible. Everything, in some way, shape, or form, is connected to one another. Whether you can see it in the background, like Lost Izalith being seen in Tomb of the Giants, or how Firelink leads to 5 or 6 areas of the game. With shortcuts and keys, you can travel pretty far without using a teleport in this game. The levels can also empower the basic story, like in Anderlondo, the home of Gwyn and his children. A bright, golden sky filled with knights protecting it. You feel like you're in a kingdom that is still alive and bustling. But if you were to kill the daughter Gwendolyn, the illusion is broken. The golden sky becomes a bluey night sky, and it stays like that forever. Even in Gwyn's home, the Age of Fire, his light is coming closer to the end, and the dark is right outside his door. On the flip side, New Londo Ruins is a dark, flooded city with ghosts wherever you turn. Once the water is gone, you see these dark-robed people with weird red hands and a blob of flesh at the bottom. Where did these things come from? Well, nearby is the Abyss, home of humanity and the dark. At the bottom of the dark is the four lords waiting for you. You can guess on why this place was flooded. I won't tell you, that's something for you to figure out. But if you do want to take a deep dive, and I mean a deep look into the lore, I would highly recommend watching the or the Brothers Code's videos on Dark Souls lore. They are an amazing watch. Highly recommend it if you have some free time to spare. With all of these undeads and demons trying to kill you, there's gotta be something you can do, right? You're right. You have weapons! Dark Souls combat is really tight, and all the attacks have weight to them. The movement is very responsive, and you rarely ever feel like you're out of control in a fight. Not you. With a light attack, heavy, spells, arrows, and poise, meaning how much you can shrug off attacks, status effects, you can do a lot, and you can die to a lot in Dark Souls. Every weapon and armor are broken down to categories, so most weapons have a certain speed, damage, and stats that can be embedded with something more to make it stronger. Of course, there are special weapons, like the Abyss Greatsword with two special attacks, a spin and a front foot slash, just like Artorias does when you encounter him in the DLC, or the category Ultra Greatsword and its Dragon Greatsword, which its heavy attack allows the player to shoot a shockwave in a line and could also travel up walls. Many weapons will be better than others in different ways, and others will be way better in a PvP setting, though in PvE, the main game, you can use most of these weapons to good effect. It's best to experiment to see which ones you like the best, although just make sure you have the stat requirements to use the weapon. You don't want to hit them with the dull end of your greatsword. Now it's time to talk about Dark Souls' impact on gaming. The impact it had was huge for the industry. FromSoft's becoming a household name, studios allowing games to be more difficult and not having to worry about the game flopping due to game journalists. Now any game can become the Dark Souls of X, and gamers anywhere wanting to beat this game and this challenge. A story that wasn't half-baked or shoved down your throat. Finally, a masterpiece of a game that's always replayable. A game I always come back to since 2012, when I started and fell in love with Dark Souls. A game I couldn't even beat as a kid, to then later in life not only beating the game many times, but even did challenges like the bow only run, just for the fun of it. A game that sparked two other Dark Souls games, Bloodborne, Sekiro, all the way to Elden Ring, that all my friends played and loved to death. Not me though. I love Dark Souls and everything about it, even the Beta Chaos to some degree. It's sad that a series is technically over, but it was worth for the ride, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Ah, it is always nice writing my thoughts. I do hope my fair lady gets this letter. Don't you think, Solaire? Solaire? Ah, looks like he went off again. Oh well, I'll deliver this letter myself. Whew, how long have I been at this bonfire? Ah, who am I kidding? It's a dark world out there. I think I'll stick around a while longer. If you enjoyed this video, why not leave it a like? It can go a long way, and it would be much appreciated, so that way I can pay these souls to deliver this letter.